Hence, proof that even in the coldest, most rigid societies, life could find a way when nurtured with care. The news of the child became their shared hope. Leora spoke to the unborn life as though it were already present, telling stories of earth, of kindness, and of courage. Kale prepared for the future with meticulous care, ensuring that they would have a safe place for the child to grow, free from fear or judgment. They built shelters, cultivated small gardens, and hunted with patience and respect for the planet's balance. Each task, no matter how simple, felt sacred because it was part of creating a world where their child could thrive. Leora often watched Kale, marveling at his determination and quiet strength. It was not the muscles or bravado that impressed her, but his heart, his unwavering belief in her, in their family, and in the value of life itself. Even in this peaceful existence, challenges remained. The planet was beautiful, but unpredictable. Sudden storms, strange predators, and treacherous terrain tested their skills and patience. Yet, with each obstacle, Leora discovered a growing confidence. She had faced the judgment of her own people, the threat of exile, and the fear of being abandoned. The wilderness, with all its dangers, felt simpler by comparison. She realized that fear could be tamed with trust, courage, and love. And Kale, always beside her, showed her that true strength was not in control or power, but in commitment and care. As months passed and the child within her grew, Leora began to understand the true meaning of freedom. It was not merely the absence of surveillance or expectation. It was the ability to choose love over fear, courage over obedience, and hope over despair. She had left the palace a princess marked for ridicule, and now she was becoming a mother, a creator of life, and a witness to the unpredictable, beautiful force of the human spirit. Kale's hand resting on her belly reminded her daily of the miracle they had nurtured together. For the first time, she truly believed that life could be extraordinary when guided by compassion, trust, and the unbreakable bond between two hearts. The journey back to Xylenia was quiet, yet charged with emotion. Leora's steps were careful, carrying the weight of new life and new purpose. The planet she had fled years ago, once a prison of judgment and expectation, now awaited her not as a place of fear, but as a stage for transformation. Beside her, Kale moved with the steady confidence she had come to rely on. Every glance between them carried reassurance, every touch a reminder that they had survived, grown, and built a bond no council, no tradition could break. Leora's heart beat not with fear, but with anticipation, an unfamiliar, thrilling courage. The Xylenian palace rose before them, its crystal spires gleaming in the light of twin suns. Inside, the council still ruled with the same cold authority, unaware that their joke had been transformed into something far greater than they could comprehend. Leora walked with Kale, shoulders straight, chin high. She no longer carried the timid hesitations of a princess born to Kone, expectation, but the quiet strength of someone who had faced the wilderness, survival, and the miracle of life itself. Whispers followed their steps, curious and fearful, as if the palace itself sensed that something extraordinary was approaching. When they entered the grand hall, the effect was immediate. The council, accustomed to control and obedience, could not hide their shock. The princess they had mocked was no longer fragile or fearful. She was radiant, carrying the unmistakable glow of motherhood. The human who had stood beside her, the one they had thought powerless, walked with calm authority. And between them, the child moved within Leora, a living testament to a bond they could not dismiss or contain. Silence fell, thick and heavy, as the nobles absorbed what had arrived before them. Leora's presence was no longer a subject for amusement. It was a challenge to their assumptions, a revelation of human resilience and love. Leora spoke first, her voice steady and clear. She did not demand respect, nor did she plead for understanding. Instead, she told her story, the truth of her life in the wild, of Kale's unwavering care, of the discovery that she could carry life after all. Her words were simple, yet they carried a power the Xylenians could not deny. She described the joys and struggles, the moments of fear and triumph, and the profound love that had grown between them. The council, rigid and proud, had never encountered such courage expressed not in power or commands, but in honesty, vulnerability, and strength. Kale stood beside her, silent but unshakable. His presence amplified her words, a living proof that humans could embody compassion, courage, and unyielding loyalty. The nobles who had once laughed at their union could not reconcile their assumptions with the truth before them. Leora's child, a symbol of life and unity, moved within her, and the room felt impossibly still, as if even the walls were listening. In that quiet, the council began to grasp that what they had intended as a joke had been transformed into a a legacy that no mockery could erase. Tears glistened in Leora's eyes, not of fear but of triumph. She had returned to the place that had once defined her worth with nothing but judgment, carrying proof of life, love, and defiance of expectation. The palace, which had once been a cage, now seemed smaller in comparison to the life she carried and the human who had stood beside her. Whispers of admiration began to circulate, cautious and trembling, as nobles realized that a new story was unfolding, one of courage, trust, and the unpredictable power of humanity. As she looked at Kale, their hands meeting over the swell of her belly, Leora felt an overwhelming sense of completion. They had left as a princess and a human, uncertain and afraid. They had returned as a mother and a partner, unbroken and triumphant. The Zelenian Council could no longer define her. They could no longer judge her. In her eyes, the future was theirs to shape, a future where life, love, and the human spirit could rewrite the rules of even the most rigid society. And for the first time, Leora knew that she was no longer just a princess. She was a force, a mother, and a testament to the unexpected, unstoppable strength of humanity. The palace of Xylenia had never felt so quiet. Even the usual hum of crystal energy seemed muted, as if the universe itself had paused to witness what was unfolding. Leora walked through the grand halls with Kale at her side, the child within. Her moving gently, a small but undeniable proof of life and love. Nobles and council members alike turned to watch, their expressions ranging from shock to awe. No one dared interrupt. The princess they had once mocked had returned, not as a pawn, not as a fragile figure to be judged, but as a mother radiant, unyielding, and full of a quiet power that demanded respect. Leora reached the central chamber, the heart of the council, where the elders sat in their elevated seats, expecting to see her humbled or fearful. Instead, she stopped in the center, her gaze steady and her voice calm but firm. She spoke not with anger, but with the authority of experience. She told them of the wilderness, of survival and struggle, of the love that had grown between her and Kale, and the miracle that had come from it. Every word carried weight, not because of threats or power, but because it was real, authentic, undeniable, and full of humanity. The council could feel it in their bones. The life they had tried to dismiss, the bond they had thought inconsequential, was far stronger than they had ever imagined. Kale stood silently beside her, a steady presence. The human's mere existence among them was a testament to adaptability, compassion, and courage. Leora had learned from him, grown because of him, and together they had defied expectation, survived danger, and created life where none had been believed possible. The council had always valued perfection, control, and the absence of error. But here, in the unassuming bond of two beings, lay a power they could not quantify. It was messy, unpredictable, and alive, and it had triumphed. Whispers spread across the chamber as Leora allowed the elders to take in what had happened. Some were ashamed, others hesitant, but all were undeniably affected. The child she carried symbolized more than just a future heir. It was a living proof that life and love could defy logic, that courage could change destiny, and that humanity, strange, fragile, yet relentless, could alter even the most rigid traditions. Leora felt a swell of emotion, not for herself, but for the life growing within her, for the human who had never faltered, and for the truth that they had created together. She was no longer bound by the judgments of others. She belonged to herself, to her family, and to a future of her own making. The council, for the first time in memory, was silent. Their authority felt diminished, not by words of challenge, but by the undeniable reality of love, life, and courage. Leora's presence alone shifted the balance. The human by her side demonstrated the strength of spirit over tradition, the triumph of care over cruelty. And slowly, hesitantly, respect began to emerge where mockery once reigned. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were witnessing its undeniable force. Kale gently rested his hand over Leora's belly, and she leaned into him, feeling the warmth, strength, and constancy that had guided them through the wilderness and back. The child inside them stirred, as if sensing the world opening up, as if already claiming a place among the stars. Leora smiled, tears shining in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of the moment. They had arrived together, unbroken, triumphant, and ready to rewrite what it meant to be. Princess Ilara of the Valorians stood in the grand hall, her heart heavy with thoughts she could not speak. The palace around her gleamed with crystal walls and golden spires, but the light felt cold that day. Today was supposed to be a celebration, a marriage to end decades of war, but to her, it felt like chains disguised as flowers. She glanced at the throne where her father, King Valor, sat with his advisors, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. They believed this marriage could finally bring peace. But Alara could not help feeling that her role was nothing more than a symbol. A piece in a game she had no say in, her human husband. Kale stood beside her, tall and broad-shouldered, a quiet strength radiating from his presence. Unlike the polished nobles of her world, he wore a simple uniform, rough and practical, with scars barely hidden beneath the sleeves. He had arrived weeks ago, bringing with him stories of battles humans had fought across distant planets, and yet here he was, in a palace filled with glittering etiquette, looking oddly out of place. But there was something about him, a raw confidence that did not demand respect, but seemed to earn it effortlessly. Alara could feel it even from a distance, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold ceremony around them. The court fell silent as the ceremony began. Valor priests spoke words of unity, of peace, of the bond that would tie humans and Valorians forever. Alara's hand shook slightly as she lifted her gaze to Kale. His eyes, dark and steady, met hers. There was no pretension there, no fear, only a calm promise that whatever came, he would face it with her. She could not explain why, but a tiny spark of hope flickered inside her chest. Perhaps this human was not just a warrior of flesh and blood. Perhaps he carried something more powerful, the courage to face impossible odds. Even in a world that had always been against him, the priests placed their hands over theirs. And Kale spoke in the Valorian tongue, careful and deliberate. I pledge my strength, my life, and my honor to you, Princess Alara, not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as one who will stand beside you in all things. His voice was firm, steady, and it seemed to vibrate through the hall, reaching every corner. Some nobles exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if a human could ever truly be one of them. Others looked on with curiosity, whispering about the oddity of his words. And yet, for Alara, the words settled deep in her heart. A warrior's vow, simple and unshakable, meant far more than any royal decree. After the ceremony, the court retreated to the gardens for celebration. Lanterns floated on the water, reflecting like stars caught in the palace ponds. Musicians played unfamiliar human tunes, which blended strangely with Valorian melodies, creating a harmony that felt fragile yet beautiful. Alara walked beside Kale, her fingers brushing his arm without thinking. He smiled faintly, as if sensing her turmoil, and said softly, I do not know all your customs, but I will learn them. I will learn you. The simplicity of the words struck her. So many had spoken of duty and peace, yet Kale spoke of understanding and presence. Later, when the festivities quieted and the palace fell into a hushed night, Alara stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Kale joined her silently, his hand brushing hers in the dark. You wonder if this was the right choice, he said. She nodded, unable to speak. It will be, he promised, because we face it together. You and I. For the first time in weeks, Alara allowed herself to breathe fully. Perhaps this marriage was more than politics. Perhaps in this human beside her, she had found the courage to believe in something larger than duty. And though the shadows of war still lingered at the edges of her mind, she could not deny the flicker of hope Kale had lit inside her heart, a light that she sensed might one day grow to protect them all, the stars reflected in the glassy river below. And for the first time, Alara felt that maybe, just maybe, the impossible could be endured. With Kale at her side, the world might yet bend toward peace, and she would not face it alone. The morning air in Valor City carried a strange tension. Even the sun seemed hesitant, casting long shadows over the golden spires and crystal bridges. Princess Alara wandered through the palace corridors, her mind restless. The celebrations of her marriage still lingered in the memory of the city, but a whisper of unease had begun to spread among the courtiers. Rumors traveled faster than any messenger. An army, large and ruthless, had formed in the northern deserts, led by rogue generals who rejected the peace treaty. Their message was simple: the union of humans and Valorians would not stand. Alara's heart sank as she listened to the advisors debate strategy in the council hall. Their voices were sharp, filled with fear and caution. Many argued for retreat, for diplomacy, for negotiation. But Kale's voice cut through the tension like a blade. We do not negotiate with cowards who burn their own homes for pride, he said, his tone calm yet unyielding. His eyes scanned the council chamber, meeting every gaze with the quiet intensity that unnerved even the most seasoned generals. If we wait, they will strike when we are weakest. If we act, we fight for every life in this city. Alara stood silently behind him, watching the reactions. Some Valorians whispered doubts humans were too reckless, too brash. Yet others watched him with a flicker of hope, as if they had seen something in Kale's eyes that spoke of unshakable resolve. It was not just his strength that impressed them. It was his certainty, the way he carried himself as if the impossible were simply another challenge to be met. The princess felt a mixture of fear and admiration. She had married him to bring peace, but she realized now that his presence might be their only chance to survive. Scouts returned with more details that evening. The rogue army had grown in size and skill. They were not only humans who had once fought alongside Kale in distant campaigns. They were mercenaries, deserters, and warriors who thrived on chaos. Their approach would bring fire and blood to the city gates if nothing stopped them. Elura's stomach twisted as she imagined the destruction, the innocent lives caught in the crossfire. She had hoped that marriage alone could bind two worlds together. But she now understood that peace required courage, not ceremony. Kale approached her quietly on the balcony that night, the wind tugging at his cloak. His face was illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns below, yet his expression held no fear. "They will come," he said simply, "and I will meet them." Elura's hands trembled. She had expected a plan, a speech, or a call for reinforcements, but he spoke as if standing alone against an army was natural. "Kale, you cannot fight them all by yourself," she whispered, worry lacing every word. He turned to her, eyes steady, voice gentle yet firm. "I will not be alone. You, your people, and every soldier here, they will stand because I stand." Courage spreads, Elura. Even when it seems impossible, it can ignite hearts. His words felt strange, almost magical in their simplicity. For a moment, the tension in her chest eased. Somehow he made the impossible feel achievable, and for the first time, she believed in the strength of humans beyond their weapons or numbers. That night, Elura could not sleep. She watched from the balcony as the city below glimmered with lights, unaware of the storm gathering in the deserts to the north. Kale walked among the guards and soldiers, speaking to each with quiet respect, offering advice, encouragement, and confidence. The Valorians, who had once doubted him, began to see the truth. A human's courage was not reckless, but a force that could bind allies, inspire loyalty, and challenge the impossible. Elura finally understood what she had married, not just a warrior, but a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope in a world teetering on the edge of war. Her chest tightened, but it was no longer with fear alone. It was anticipation, hope, and admiration. She whispered to the night sky, "If courage can save a city, may he never doubt it." And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that the coming battle would test everything, yet she also knew that with Kale, no threat seemed insurmountable. The wind carried the distant hum of the desert army, and Elura's heart beat faster. Tomorrow the world would change, and the man she had married would face the storm, not as a commander, not as a soldier, but as one human daring to stand against an entire army. The dawn broke over Valor City with a tense, restless energy. Golden light spilled over the crystal spires, glinting off the rooftops, yet the city felt heavy with fear. From the northern gates, scouts reported the approach of the rogue army, their numbers vast and disciplined, their banners dark and menacing. Princess Elura stood atop the palace balcony, her hands gripping the railing as she watched the horizon. Her heart thumped like a drum in her chest. This was the moment she had dreaded, the test that would determine if her marriage, and the fragile peace it symbolized, could survive. Kale walked beside her, his armor scuffed from weeks of training with the Valorian guards. He surveyed the battlefield without fear, his expression calm, almost serene. "They outnumber us," Elura whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Kale nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the distant enemy. "Yes, but they do not have our resolve," he replied. There was no arrogance in his tone, only certainty, the kind of certainty that could ignite courage in the hearts of those who had begun to doubt. The rogue army reached the outskirts of the city just as the sun kissed the horizon. Thousands of soldiers, weapons raised, eyes filled with hatred for the humans and the princess alike, prepared to strike. Yet Kale did something no one expected. He stepped forward alone. The Valorian soldiers froze, unsure if this human commander had lost his mind. "Kale," Elura called, fear and desperation mixing in her voice. "You cannot face them alone." He turned to her, eyes unwavering. "I will not fight alone," he said quietly. "I carry the courage of everyone who believes in peace. If they fall, we all fall, but if I stand, they will see strength and hope, and they may falter." His words carried weight, not of magic or politics, but of truth. With that, he charged into the front line. Sword gleaming in the early light, his movements fluid and precise. Faster than any Valorian could follow, the rogue army hesitated, confusion spreading like wildfire. Their weapons struck at him again and again, yet Kale moved with uncanny skill, deflecting attacks, dodging strikes, and retaliating with power that seemed impossible for a single human. Each swing of his blade, each step forward, was a challenge to the overwhelming numbers before him. He struck with precision, not fury, and slowly, the tide of fear began to shift. Soldiers who had once sneered at humans found themselves pausing, uncertain, captivated by the bravery of one man standing where thousands should have fallen. Alara could not look away. She felt a mix of terror and awe twisting inside her. Kale's body was battered, his armor dented, and streaks of blood stained his uniform, yet he fought on, unyielding. The palace walls trembled as Valorian soldiers, inspired by his defiance, joined the fray. What had seemed like certain doom now had a spark of hope. Kale's human courage was contagious, spreading through the ranks like a rising fire, igniting loyalty and determination where fear had ruled before. Hours passed, and the battle raged with unrelenting intensity. Kale moved like a storm incarnate, taking blows that should have crippled him and turning the enemy's strength against them. The rogue generals, once confident, began to falter as their men hesitated, uncertain of how to fight someone who seemed unstoppable. Alara watched every moment, her fear mingling with admiration and something deeper, a realization that humans, though smaller and seemingly fragile, carried a spirit no army could break. As the sun climbed higher, it became clear that Kale's audacity had shifted the battle. What began as a hopeless confrontation now held a glimmer of victory. Alara clenched her fists, pride and relief washing over her. The man she had married had become more than a commander, more than a soldier. He had become a symbol of courage, a single human standing tall against impossible odds. And in her heart, she understood that peace might just survive this day because he refused to surrender. Even when the world demanded it. By midday, the battlefield had become a chaotic storm of clashing steel and fire. Dust and smoke blurred the horizon, carrying with it the cries of men and the metallic scent of blood. Kale moved through the chaos like a force of nature, striking with precision, evading attacks, and somehow staying one step ahead of hundreds who sought to bring him down. He was alone, surrounded on all sides, yet his presence did not waver. Princess Alara watched from the palace walls, her hands gripping the balcony rail so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her chest ached with fear, yet her heart swelled with pride. Every time Kale deflected an attack or lifted a fallen soldier from the ground, the Valorian troops hesitated, their doubts melting into awe. They had trained for years to fight battles, yet this human moved with a speed and cunning no formal education could teach. It was not just his strength, they realized it was his courage, his refusal to bend or break, that made him invincible in spirit. Soldiers who had whispered doubts about humans now shouted his name, rallying behind him with renewed energy. Alara's mind raced. She had thought she married a man to symbolize peace, to show unity between humans and Valorians. But Kale was proving that peace demanded more than symbolism. It demanded heart, sacrifice, and unwavering courage. She remembered his words from the night before. "I carry the courage of everyone who believes in peace." She could now see the truth in them, not as empty rhetoric, but as living reality. One man, human though he was, had changed the course of the battle simply by refusing to falter. The rogue generals, realizing their initial advantage slipping away, formed tighter lines. They surrounded Kale, seeking to overwhelm him with sheer numbers. But he moved like water, flowing through gaps in their formation, striking with force and intelligence that defied comprehension. Every swing of his blade, every deflection of a blaster shot, became a signal to the Valorians. Fear could be fought, despair could be challenged, and hope could rise even in the darkest hour. Alara could not hold back any longer. She descended from the balcony, rushing to the command room to witness Kale in action more closely. From the strategic vantage point, she saw him take blows that should have felled a dozen men, yet he stood, wounded but unbroken. The rogue soldiers faltered, confusion clouding their once confident expressions. It was as if the battlefield itself had recognized Kale as a force beyond mere flesh. And in that moment, Alara felt a profound mixture of fear, admiration, and a deep, unshakable love. Kale's eyes caught hers from across the battlefield. In that instant, the world fell silent for Alara. She saw not just a warrior fighting for survival, but a man fighting for a dream larger than himself, a dream of peace, of life, of hope. He raised his sword to the sky, a single human standing tall against impossible odds, and the soldiers around him roared with renewed determination. Valorians who had been hesitant, fearful, or even resentful now pressed forward, inspired by his courage. One by one, they joined him, transforming despair into strength, fear into action. By evening, the rogue army's lines wavered under the combined onslaught of Kale's audacity and the newly inspired Valorian soldiers. The battlefield, once dominated by fear and uncertainty, now pulsed with energy, determination, and hope. Princess Alara, exhausted yet exhilarated, realized that Kale's stand was more than bravery. It was a spark that had ignited the hearts of all who witnessed it. The impossible, she thought, could be achieved when courage refused to surrender. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and red, Kale still fought, though battered and bloodied. He had become the axis around which the battle turned, a symbol of unity and unyielding human will. Alara whispered into the wind, her voice trembling, "May we never forget this day. And may his courage always guide us." And deep within her, she knew that Kale's human heart, fearless and unwavering, had changed the fate of her people forever. The battlefield was a storm of chaos, smoke rising in thick curtains and dust swirling like restless spirits. The air trembled with the clash of weapons, the roar of soldiers, and the pounding of countless hearts. Kale moved through it all, as if he were both inside and above the chaos, a whirlwind of strength and focus. Every step he took, every swing of his blade, carried the weight of hope, not just for himself, but for an entire city teetering on the edge of destruction. Alara stood at the palace balcony, eyes wide as she watched him in awe. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his armor battered, and yet he pressed forward, unwavering. The rogue generals had gathered their finest soldiers, intending to crush him in a final coordinated strike. But Kale had anticipated it. His movements were precise, almost choreographed, a dance of death that left the enemy scrambling, confused, and afraid. Every step he took inspired those around him. The Valorian soldiers surged forward, emboldened by the human who refused to yield. Kale's strategy was unorthodox but devastatingly effective. He used the terrain, luring clusters of enemies into narrow paths where their numbers counted for nothing. With swift strikes and calculated feints, he dismantled their formations, turning fear into panic. The rogue soldiers had expected to overwhelm a human, to crush him with sheer force, yet they found themselves outmaneuvered, outhought, and outmatched. Kale's audacity and cunning turned the tide, and the first cracks in the enemy lines appeared. Alara's heart pounded as she saw him lift a fallen Valorian soldier and place him behind the line of defense, all while deflecting multiple attacks. The precision, the speed, the fearless intensity, it was unlike anything she had ever seen. She realized that humans were more than what her people had thought. They were smaller, yes, and seemingly fragile, but their minds and hearts were capable of feats that no amount of training could replicate. One human standing alone had become the center of hope, and that hope was spreading faster than any blade or blaster could reach. Hours passed in a blur of battle. Kale's relentless advance and tactical brilliance forced the rogue generals to rethink their strategy. They attempted to flank him, to trap him in a killing zone, but Kale anticipated each move, turning their own aggression into their undoing. His blade moved faster than the eye could follow, yet each strike was deliberate, each decision calculated. The Valorian soldiers rallied, inspired by his example, their fear replaced with courage, their hesitation replaced with action. From the palace walls, Alara could see the battle shift. The enemy's confidence wavered, their formations faltered, and panic began to ripple through their ranks. She felt Tay,